Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Narayanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Narayanaya. Suklambaradharam Vitnam Sachivannam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyaye Sarva Vignopashantaye Ananta Samsara Samudratara Naukaitabhyam Guru Bhaktidabhyam Vairagya Samrajyata Pujanabhyam Namo Namah Shri Guru Padukabhyam Anjana Nandanam Veeram Janaki Shokanasanam Kapishamakshagandaram Vande Lankabayankaram. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Yadangripangerugarenu lagnam Nipiya Neeram Vimalantarangagam Janami Tattvam Nijamatmarupam Tam Naumi Narayana Tirthamaryam. Narayana Tirthamaryam. Namaskaram. Welcome to the 35th session of Krishna Leela Tarangini, the first under Tarangam 5 of the opera. In the last session, namely the 34th session, we based our appreciations on chapters 20 and 21 of Dasamaskandam or Srimad Bhagavatam. But we also were able to use generously the gifts from Narayana Bhattadiri's Narayaniyam, Leela Sukha's Krishna Karnamrutam, Periyazhvar Tirumozhi, Andal Tirupavai, and also from Meera Mai on Sadguru. The subjects were the descriptions of the two main seasons in Vrindavanam and Gokulam, and also on the magical flute with the underlying philosophy. Tarangam 5, as I mentioned before, is a short chapter focusing on two significant leelas, Gopii Vastrapaharam and Govardhana Uddharam. Significant for the philosophical reasons as well as lessons to the light-hearted gopis, to the haughty Indra who questioned the supremacy of the Purnavadara when he unleashed torrential rains on the Gopis and the cattle. Let us listen to the renditions with meanings on slides. The first batch will be slokams 119, 120, and 121, which is the summary explanation. Gopii Vastrapaharam Apahararavya चरित्रम् अभिनीयते गोपी वस्त्र अपहारव्यं चरित्रम् अभिनीयते गोवर्धन अग्रे उद्धार गोवर्धन अग्रे उद्धार चरितं हरिणा कृतम् पात्रप्रवेशस्तु पुनर्नन्दो पात्रप्रवेशस्तु पुनर्नन्दो गोप्यस्ततः परं बालकृष्ण ततः कृष्णकृतं बालकृष्ण ततः कृष्णकृतं वस्त्रापहरणं कृष्णकृतं वस्त्रापहरणम् उद्धृत्य रक्षिते चास्मिन् उद्धृत्य रक्षिते चास्मिन् गोकुले गोकुले उद्धृत्य रक्षिते चास्मिन् गोकुले गोकुले अद्रिं कृता अद्रिघृता स्तुति इन्द्रेण कामदेन्वा इन्द्रेण कामदेन्वा इन्द्रेण कामदेन्वा च कृष्णस्य आत्रैष संग्रहः इन्द्रेण कामदेन्वा च कृष्णस्य आत्रैष संग्रहः After the first three slokams in Tarangam 5, Tirtha then goes on to describe the actual incident, the first incident of Krishna coming to the banks of a pool near Yamuna and watching the Gopikas taking a bath in the pool after leaving their clothes on the banks. Krishna then picks up those clothes and goes to the tallest branch of a tree overhanging the pool or the river and calls out the Gopikas and sings jestingly. Let us now listen to the slokams 122 and 123 which describe the incident, followed by the Geetam 43 as from Krishna to the Gopikas. Nitambini gana hride Nitambini gana hride Nitambini gana hride Digambaram vilokyatat Dwarambaram Digambaram vilokyatat Dwarambaram Bahitidam karambuje samudvaga Bahunnate tatadrume mahunnato arirtito Vadan vichitra narmatam hasannagayate drisam Nitambini ganam hride digambaram vilokyadat Varambaram bahitidam karambuje samudvaga Nitambini ganam hride digambaram vilokyadat Varambaram bahitidam karambuje samudvaga Bahunnate tadadrume mahunnato haritito Vadan vichitra narmatam hasannagayate Bahunnate tadadrume Vadan vichitra narmatam hasannagayate Badvadukulam chakagre कुतूहलितयागरी वल्लभी वल्लभः कृष्ण हसन्नितं उवाच तदा। आयाये व्रजयुवती वृन्दत्वरया परम पुरुषमेव परिणाम विरहित परम पुरुषमेव भज जगदेकनाथं व्रजयुवती त्वरयायायि व्रजयुवती परिगृगाण भुवन ब्रह्मदृगावरणं परिगरसीवृता कथं व्रजयुवती परम बान्धव तव प्रकटमेव वदति परिगरकेलनमन्दं व्रजयुवती त्वरयायायि व्रजयुवती आनन्दमय भवने तव जननी सानन्दमनुचरति व्रजयुवती मायातीत वपुषं माधवमेव मायातीत वपुषं माधवमेव जनकं मानय मानय सती व्रजयुवती त्वरय आयायि व्रजयुवती हरिविरचित परिहासकथारस हरिविरचित परिहासकथारस गौरवसंस्मरण व्रजयुवती गुरुभक्त शिवनार यणतीर्थकृतमिदं गुरुभक्त यणतीर्थकृतमिदं गोविन्द जनदूषणं व्रजयुवती त्वरयायायि गुरुभक्त शिवनारायण तीर्थकृतमिदं गोविन्द जनदूषणं व्रजयुवती त्वरया आयायि व्रजयुवती At the commencement of the song, which you just now heard, Tirtha says, Ayahi Tvaraya, Mayahi Salile Duram. Simplistically, the meaning is, come here quickly. Mayahi Salile Duram. Do not venture too far into the waters. This is a case of Slesha. Either this can mean, come close to me, or as get back to the riverbank soonest. Slesha is, in English, paronomasia. It's a figure of speech by which two meanings are expressed by the single word. According to Ciranjeeva Bhattacharya, who lived in 17th century, while defining Vakrukti Alankara in his Kavya Vilasa, describing one of the 93 Alankaras as figures of speech, Slesha is a commonly used figure of speech. That is what is applied here when Ayahi Tvaraya and Mayahi Salile Duram is interpreted. You could see that. As per Bhagavatam, the Vraja maids had their dip in the Kalindi or Yamuna river and not in a pool, as Narayana Tirtha mentioned. In the third stanza, Tirtha says, Tava Janani Sanandam Anusarati Mayatita Vapusham. The mother referred to in this particular slokam or the stanza, Tava Janani Sanandam Anusarati Mayatita Vapusham is Maya. The mother is Maya, to which is attributed the birth and existence of the gopis as such. The mother abides with the Supreme Father, happily serving him, and he himself being beyond the effects of Maya. This is when the Gopikas who are unable to exit the pool or river start pleading to Krishna, singing his benediction as Tirtha sings. Govindam Gopikanando, Govindam Gopikananda, Vadantam Sharmanarmataga, Govindam Gopikanandam, Vadantam Sharmanarmataga, Punaga Vidavagrastam, Punya Punja Palodayam, Punaga Vidavagrastam, Punaga Vidavagrastam, Punya Punja Palodayam, Bhaktanugraha Samvyagra Brihitadbhuta Vigraha Yutam Gopyo Jaguhu Krishna Kantagna Jale Stitaga Yutam Gopyo Jagu Krishnam Kantagna Jale Stitaga Krishna Kantagna Jale Stitaga Shri Krishna Tavaka Mahima Kena Panyate 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 Shri Krishna Mahima Kena Panyate Shri Krishna Tavaka Let me first clarify the hidden Vedantic sentiment from Tirtha in stanza 2, the Geetam which you just now heard. The expression used here is Shakagra Lakshya Sadvigraha Samvidehi Bo Shoka Sagarat Uddhara Mam Suddha Bhavam Darshayavo. There are two separate sentiments used here, Shakagra Lakshya Sadvigraha as well as Suddha Bhavam Darshayavo. The meaning is, Krishna, your noble body is seen at the tip of the tree branch. Of course, plain meaning is, now you have gone on top of the tallest tree. What we can see you is at the end of the tree, or actually tip of the branch of the tree, you are lying there and also holding the flute there and watching us. But please give us your beneficence. That's the primary meaning. And of course, in the end, they say, please lift me up from the ocean of unhappiness and show me your pristine noble form. Suddha Bhavam Darshaya Bho. The branch of this tree is compared to the Vedas, and the tip of the branch is likened to Vedanta and Mahavakyas, which are great holy pronouncements. Like the many Vedavakyas that you have heard, like Tattvamasi and Aham Brahmasmi, by which alone the Supreme Brahman can be known or understood as Sachidananda Swarupi. Suddha Bhavam Darshaya can simply say, show me the pure state free from delusion or Maya. If we were to explain analytically the Vedantic significance of it, we should refer to Nasadiya Sukta. I think I have mentioned about Nasadiya Sukta earlier in one of the earlier lectures, but for the sake of convenience, I will repeat that. Nasadiya Sukta is otherwise after the incipit na asat, or not the non-existent. Not the non-existent. That sukta is also known as the hymn of creation, and it is at 129th sukta of the 10th mandala of the Rigveda. It is concerned with cosmology and the origin of the universe and consists of 7 trishtubs. Trishtub is a meter. It is a Vedic meter of 44 syllables. So the last trishtub because first of all, this particular sukta has 7 trishtubs, and the last one, the 7th one, is relevant to the Vedanta Satyam we mentioned earlier. Iyam visrishtihi ata abhabhuva yadi vadade yadi vana yo asyadyakshaha parame vyomanso anga veda yadi vana veda. When all creation had its origin, the creator, whether he fashioned it or whether he did not, the creator who surveys it all from the highest heaven, and he knows, or maybe even he does not know. Tattvamasi and Aham Brahmasmi, by which alone the Supreme Brahman can be known or understood as Sachidananda Swarupi, Suddhabhavam Darsaya, show me, that is the pure state from delusion or Maya. Scholars interpret God, so Anga Veda Yadivana Veda. He knows about himself as the one who cannot be known. In other words, who is Brahman? Brahman is the one who knows about himself as the one who cannot be known. It looks like a cyclical riddle, but that is exactly the Vedantic reference in Nasadiya Sukta. This episode demands another section of references and philosophical explanations. But before we proceed further with the opera, something needs to be explained to help ponder and be ready for the next session. Krishna is often portrayed as a thief or stealer, not only of butter and hearts, but of clothes as well. In the earlier Tarangams, every mood, nuance, and hearty caper of Krishna's childhood is presented on the lines of Srimad Bhagavatam. In this Tarangam, Narayana Tirtha further accentuates his basic theme that Krishna is the Sachidananda Swarupa, not prone to human frailties, and all the acts and words of Krishna are made strictly in accordance with this theme. The well-known episode of Gopii Vastrapaharam is fully presented in chapter 22 of the Dasamaskandam of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Narayana Tirtha follows Sukha's sentiments and explanations to the T in many places. I will attempt to summarize chapter 22 to bring the highlights. The 38 slokams of this particular chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam describe how the marriageable daughters of the Gopa clan worshipped Katyayani to get Bhagavan Sri Krishna himself as their husband, and how Krishna stole their garments but gave the girls the ultimate boons of their choice in return, respecting and rewarding their pure love. During the month of Margashira, early in the morning, daily, the young daughters of the cowherds would take one another's hands and, singing of Krishna's Kalyana Gunas, go to the Yamuna to bathe. Desiring to obtain Krishna as their husband, they would then worship the goddess Katyayani with flowers, incense, and all other items. Vrushashuktaya gotrehi swaihi anyonya abadda bhagavaha Krishna muchaihi jaguhu yantyaha kalindyam snadu anvaham. This is the 6th sloka in the 22nd chapter. Katyayini Mahamaye Mahayoginyadishwari. Katyayini Mahamaye Mahayoginyadishwari. Nanda Gopasutam Devi Patim Me Kurute Namaha Iti Mantram Japantyasaha Pujam Chakruhu Kumarikaha. In fact, this mantram, Katyayani Mahamaya Mahayogini Ishwari, is usually inducted by our elders at home. Eons ago, I remember, whenever a young lady who aspires to get married soon comes with her parents, the older lady at home or the older gentleman at home tells the visiting parents, why don't you ask her to recite this mantra regularly, and Bhagavan himself will come to her as the husband. That is how every Gopika prayed. And they did the Katyayani Vratam. And after finishing the Vratam, they come to the pool or the river to take their shower, because they went through the entire Margasira doing the Vratam. All of you would have by now guessed the genesis and what prompted Andal to offer to the mankind her magnum opus poetry, stated to be the seed of Vedas, Vedamanithukum Vithu, the great Tirupave. She made Margasira as the most sacred month for seeking the blessings of Krishna to become their husband, following what Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita, the 10th chapter in the 35th slokam. Brihatsama tatasamnam Gayatri Chandasamaham Masanam Margasishoham Rutunam Kusumakaraha. Why did the Gopikas choose Margasira for their Katyayani Vratam? And why Andal was very particular about Margasira? Because of what Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita. Masanam Margasishoham. Amongst the hymns in the Samaveda known me to be the Brihatsama. Brihatsama Tatasamnam. Amongst poetic meters, I am the Gayatri. Gayatri Chandasamaham. Of the 12 months of the Hindu almanac, Masanam Margasishoham. According to various Acharyas, the goddess Durga mentioned in this verse is not the illusory energy of Krishna called Maya, but the internal potency of Brahman known as Yoga Maya. Should be very clearly understood. The distinction between the internal and external or illusory potency of Bhagavan is described in Narada Pancharatra in the conversation between Shruti and Vidya. Condensing those Pancharatra slokams, Bhagavan's interior potency known as Durga is dedicated to his loving service. As I said, there is no other process to achieve that Brahman. That supreme potency of Bhagavan is known as Gokuleshwari, the goddess of Gokulam. Because the goddess of Gokulam is none other than the Brahman himself, who occupies and who creates and who did everything else. Her nature is to be completely absorbed in love of God, and through her one can easily obtain the primeval Lord, namely the Lord of all that to be. Through Gokuleshwari, through that Maya, Bhagavan could be easily reached. This internal potency of Bhagavan has a covering potency known as Mahamaya, who rules the material world. In fact, Mahamaya bewilders the entire universe, and thus everyone within the universe falsely identifies the Lord himself with the material body. Incidentally, for those who are curious, Narada Pancharatra is an ancient Vaishnava literature that was compiled by Vedavyasa, Krishna Dvaipayana Vedavyasa. The Pancharatra deals with 5 branches of transcendental knowledge and was spoken by Lord Shiva to the great sage Narada. Being one of the very powerful Vaishnava literature, the origin is it was written by Vedavyasa as a compilation of whatever he heard Lord Shiva talking to the great sage Narada about the supremacy of Bhagavan Krishna. Another name of this literature is Jnanamrutasara. The 5 types of knowledge described in this book are knowledge of the absolute truth, knowledge of liberation, knowledge of devotional service, knowledge of mystic yoga, and knowledge in the mode of ignorance. One may wonder, when I described so many knowledges like absolute truth and liberation and devotional service and mystic yoga, the fifth knowledge is the knowledge, the mode of ignorance. The conclusion is that a sincere devotee of Krishna will never imagine any material quality to exist in the transcendental gopis, who are the most exalted devotees of Bhagavan himself. The only motivation in all their activities was simply to love him without expectation, except the love of Krishna. That was the only purpose. அவரிடம் அன்பு செலுத்துவது ஒன்றே காரணம், காரியம். அது ஒன்றுதான் குறிக்கோள். Loving him because they want to love Krishna is the only exceptional goal that they pursued, and that's why gopis' love were considered to be supreme compared to anybody else who loved Bhagavan. And if we foolishly consider the activities of gopis and how Krishna reacted to all of that to be mundane in any manner, it will be impossible for us to understand Krishna Leela, whether in this incident or elsewhere. Bhattacharya also spent a whole Dasakam 60 on this very episode, and his interpretation reflects the above sentiment which I gave you in detail. And let us see some of the slokams of Narayana Bhattacharya, Dasakam 60, which beautifully explains this Gopi Vastrapaharam episode.
Niyamavasito nijambaram tatasi manyamavuchytastada Yamuna jalakelana kulaha Yamuna jalakelana kulaha Puratastvam avalokya lajjita Puratastvam avalokya lajjita Trapaya namitanana swato Vanita swambarajalamantike Nihitam parigrihya burugo Vitapam tvam tarasadirudavan Nihitam parigruhya burugo Vitapam tvam tarasadirudavan.
We just now heard two slokams from Dasakam 60, summarizing what exactly happened in the words of Bhattacharya. It is wrong to think that in stealing the clothes of the Gopikas, Bhagavan punished them. No, on the contrary, Bhagavan is going to reward them. We cannot also ignore the fact that though observing the Katyayani Vratam, the Gopikas had entered the waters of Yamuna without clothes for bathing. That was a serious offense. Of course, Atharva Veda says an important dicta, Napsu Mutra Purisham Kuryat, na Nishti Ved, na Nivasanaha Srayat. Those of you who have been familiar with this kind of old compulsory dicta will understand that it is prohibited to even accidentally excrete, pass urine or feces, or spit or bathe naked in water. You don't have to do any other offensive thing. Even a simple bath with no clothes on is supposed to be a serious offense. Bhagavan stole the Gopika's clothes in order to warn that they sinned, but he was compassionate enough at the same time to eradicate the sins which had accrued on account of performance of actions prohibited by the Shrutis. One need not wonder how Bhagavan's action thus could eradicate sins. By making amends prescribed according to the relative severity, sins could be extinguished. Yes, there are sins and people commit sins, but there is always a prayachittam, not by paying some money or doing some special prayers or something, but there is always an upayam to get over that. Or some punishment has to be at least accepted. However, according to the Smriti Vakyam, prayo nama tapaproktam chittam nirnaya uchyate. This means it's a determination of the mind preceding an act of repentance that constitutes true amends for all sins. Prayo nama tapaproktam chittam nirnaya uchyate. Juxtapose this with the original dicta on the sins. Napsu mutra pradesham kuryat na nishtivete na nivasanaha srayate is a Vedic mantra about the sins that these people inadvertently committed. But there is also a Smriti Vakyam or a solution. Prayo nama tapaproktam chittam nirnaya uchyate. It is practically the determination of the mind that precedes an act of repentance that constitutes the real amends for all such sins. Bhagavan stole all the clothes of Gopikas who were accustomed to bathing naked, considering there was no better way of giving them the hard lesson and making them repent. His intention was to eliminate the sin that could prove to become an obstacle to the fruition of their vratam, Katyayani vratam or vow. What better blessing could they hope for? But in fact, no sin would accrue to the Gopikas who were driven only by Atyanta Prema for Bhagavan, and hence making amends would be unnecessary for them. However, there should be sanctity for ceremonial acts and rites and the merits arising from their due observance. That was the reason for Bhagavan's action, specifically taking away the clothes, making them feel terribly embarrassed about their behavior. And finally, Bhagavan narrates why he did that. It is very much there in Bhagavatam, Narayaniyam, and other great works. Let us look at another viewpoint expressed by His Holiness Sridhara Swami, who lived in the 14th century. His time was between 1378 and 1414. He lived approximately like 36 years of life. But he did some remarkable contributions to the Sanatana Dharma literature. He did a work called Bhavartha Deepika, a great commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sridhara's Bhavartha Deepika is different from Sri Jnanadeva's Bhavartha Deepika. People always get a little bit confused. Is it the same? No. Sridhara Swami's Bhavartha Deepika, contributed in the 14th century, is a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, whereas the Bhavartha Deepika of Sri Jnanadeva, Jnaneshwara, who lived in 13th century, was otherwise known as Jnaneshwari or Dhyaneshwari. I'm talking about Jnanadeva's Bhavartha Deepika. Incidentally, Jnaneshwari, 9,900 simple verses in Marathi on Bhagavad Gita. Because Bhagavad Gita was not within the reach of ordinary mortals, being a Sanskrit work and a sacred work, had no opportunity to go through Bhagavad Gita or Sanskrit. So thereby Jnaneshwara, none else than Bhagavan Sri Narayana himself, comes down and creates this work called Bhavartha Deepika or Jnaneshwari of 9,900 verses explaining Bhagavad Gita. Of course, Bhagavad Gita has only 700 verses. Coming back to Srimad Bhagavatam, Sridhara Swami's Bhavartha Deepika is one of the two commentaries. The other well-known commentary is Bala Prabodhini. That's also on Srimad Bhagavatam. According to these two Bhagavatam commentaries, looked at very closely, the predominant intention of Bhagavan Krishna was none of the punishments. The Gopikas who were observing the Katyayani Vratam were not married. They were Kanyas. Unlike married women who had attained maturity in mind and body and were subject to praise by their spouses, these young girls had been shy and timid by nature and not appreciated vocally at all, because that was precluded in that time and that era. So they always wanted someone to appreciate them and talk high of them and recognize them for what they are. Bhagavan stole their clothes with the main object of enhancing their bashfulness, which would prove a great blessing to them as they mature. It is with this in view that Sri Krishna declared to the Gopikas, Viditam nanuvo manishitam. This is what Bhattadri says in the 9th slokam in Dasakam 60, which we will be seeing later. In Bhattadri's words, Viditam nanuvo manishitam. I did this for a purpose. Because I have understood your wishes. Nanuvo manishitam viditam. I have understood your wishes. This is Krishna's statement to the Gopikas, as per Bhattadri. Since Bhattadri's description of the episode, slokam 6 to 11 mostly follows Sukha's description and explanation to Parikshit. Let us see a few more of those slokams before and augment with Bhagavata slokams before we get back to the opera Tarangini to see how Narayana Tirtha describes the arguments between the Gopikas and Krishna in the form of a song. That particular segment, we will keep it for the next session, but let us now focus on Bhattadari's descriptions, Slokam 6 to 11 of the Sikkim 60, and also some from Srimad Bhagavatam, to have a better appreciation of the whole episode.
Iha tavat upetya niyatam vasanam vaha. Iha tavat upetya niyatam vasanam vaha. Sudruso yatayato iti dharma mrudusmite tvayi bruvati vyamumuge vadu janaihi. Ai jiva chiram kishoranastava, ai jiva chiram kishoranastava, dasiravashi karoshikyu. Ai jiva chiram kishoranastava, dasiravashi karoshikyu. Pratishambaram ambuje kshaneti, pratishambaram ambuje kshaneti. Uditastvam smitameva dattavan bhavatyo yadi me dasyo mayoktam va karishyata atragatya svavasamsi pratichyata chusismitaha no chennaham pradasyekim kruddho raja karishyati. Adhiruhya tatam kritanjali parishuddha swagati nirikshata vasanani akilani anugraham punarevam giramapi adamuda. Adhiruhya tatam kritanjali parishuddha swagatir nirikshata vasanani akilani anugraham punarevam giramapi adamuda.
We will take the slokam 6, 7, and 8, and in between sloka 16 of chapter 22 from Srimad Bhagavatam in sequence, as you see them on the slide on the side, and go through quick summary. Bhattadari says, when you perch thus on a tree branch with their robes, igatavatu upetya niyatam vasanam vaha sudruso yatayatam. The Gopikas with bodies immersed in water up to their necks and heads lowered in shame stood there itself unable to emerge out of the river owing to their nakedness. Iti narma mrudusmitehe tvayi bhruvati vyamumeke vadu janaihi. When they prayed for return of their robes, you told them with an engaging smile, "Oh, beautiful ones, come up here and take away your respective robes." Hearing this, the young Gopikas became a lot more perplexed than what they were originally. Then they started pleading to him. Ai, Jiva Chiram Kishora. They used a different tactic here now. They are saying, "Hey, child." They suddenly reduce him to that of a child who does the pranks. "Oh, dear child, may you live long. Chinna paiyan illiyappa. Romba naal nannaru. Please don't harass us." So they thought by trying that tack, Krishna will relent. So they pleaded to the Kishora, "Dear child, you will live long. Why are you thus troubling us? We are all, after all, your maids. Oh, lotus-eyed Krishna, please return our robes to us." When you, Krishna, heard this from the Gopikas, you merely gave them a smile without returning their robes. Well, the explanation given by Bhattadari later is, Bhagavan did it so to enhance their bashfulness. In Tamil, they say, அவர்களுக்கு நாணம் வர வேண்டும் என்பதற்காக செய்யப்பட்ட செயல் இது. What Sukha says in this context is from the 16th slokam. Bhavatyo yadime dasyo mayoktam va karishyata atragatya swavasamsi pratichyata suchismitaha noche naham pradasyekim kruddho raja karishyati. If you are my servants and if you will do my bidding, come here and receive from me your clothes. That makes it very simple. Why do we have to go through the pleading game and my refusal? You say, I'm your leader and I'm your Raja and you are my maids. Simple. If you are my servants, you will just listen to my bidding. Come and collect your clothes. So you put up a very nice smile. That's what Sukha says to Parikshit. That's what Krishna did. And Bhattadri adds one step further to this slokam of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, Adiruhya tatam kritanjalihi parishuddhaha swagatehi nirikshataha vasanani akilani anugraham punarevam giramapi adamuda. When they realized that you would not return their garments despite repeated pleas and entreaties from the Gopikas, they came up the river bank, covering their private parts with their hands and pleaded for return of the clothes. Because when they thought that this fellow is not going to oblige, at least let us just listen to him. Sukha was a lot more vocal describing the preaching of Krishna to the Gopikas in slokams 17 to 20 in the chapter 22. For paucity of time, let us focus on the slide for the meanings as well. So we will be listening to these 4 slokams in a fast rendition, and alongside will be the meaning provided.
Tato jalasayat sarvadarika shitavopitaha panibhyam yonim achadya prapteruhu shitakarshita Bhagavanahata vikshya Suddhabhava prasaditaha skande nidaya vasamsi prita provacha samstitam yuyam vivastraya dapodruta vrita vyagahai tattudu devahelanam badvanjalim murdyan upanuttaye hasah kritva namodavosanam pragruhyatam Ityuchyate nabihitam brajabala matva vivastraptalavanam vratachutim tadpurti kamatadasesha karmanam sakshat kritam nemuravadhyamrugyataham.
Their devotion was purified in this manner, and after they realized for certain that they had no refuge but you, their garments were returned. And you spoke to them, Krishna, bestowing your blessings on them. Swagatir niriksha. That is how Bhattadri puts it in sloka 8. Swagatir niriksha. It was with a view to assessing the depth of their love for him that Bhagavan subjected them to this game, even though it may look apparently somewhat cruel, but this was necessary as per Bhagavan, who explains this later. And of course, that was realized quite well by the Gopikas themselves when they felt that Bhagavan was a gift and he did it for a reason. We will now be listening to slokas 9, 10, and 11 from Bhattadri's Dasakam 60, where Bhagavan confirms a few things to the Gopikas. And there is a reason why Bhattadri was bringing it up even while discussing this Gopi Vastrapaharam. Let us listen to those slokas now. Those 3 slokas will fall into the same sequence.
Viditam nanuva manishitam vaditarattu chihayogyam uttaram yamuna puline sachandrika yamuna puline sachandrika chanada ityabalatvam uchivan yamuna puline sachandrika chanada Ityabhalasvam uchivan upakarnya bhavan mukachyutam madhunishyanti vacho mrugi drisaha pranayadai viksha vikshate vadanabjam shanakai griham gadaha iti nanvanugrihya vallavihi vipinanteshu pureva sancharan Karuna shishiro hare hara tvarayame sakalamaya valim Karuna shishiro hare hara tvarayame sakalamaya valim.
O Gopikas, I have understood your desires. Viditam nanuvo manishitam. As I said earlier in the prior context, Viditam nanuvo manishitam. Bhagavan confirms that he is very clearly aware of their desires. Vaditaraha tu iha yogyam uttaram. But I do not wish to say anything at this point now. The moonlit nights on the sandbanks of river Yamuna will give you the appropriate response. Yamuna puline sachandrikaha kshanada itya balastvam uchivan. This is how Krishna confirmed indirectly what they are going to get. But he says, Krishna, thus you told them suggestively what is going to happen very soon. Of course, there is a subhashitam known as Phalanumeyaha Prarambaha. Phalanumeyaha Prarambaha. In other words, great men do not proclaim in advance what they propose to do. Great personalities are pretty quiet. Even though they are going to do something significant and phenomenal, they will not declare it in advance. So the word kshanada can also mean one which gives pleasure, while here it is with moonlit connotes nights. In the next slokam, the slokam number 10, Bhattacharya says, "O Krishna, hearing all those honey-coated words, Upakarnya Bhavan Mukam Uchitam, Pranayadi Viksha Vikshate, Padanabjam Shanakehi Graham Kataha." Bhagavane, hearing those sweet honey words that emerge from your mouth, the Gopikas, an account of love that has sprouted naturally and was nourished by the words, Viditam Nanuvo Manishitam, reluctantly left her home, looking again and again, looking again and again at your lotus face. Even though they were just going home, they couldn't leave you, not wanting to be separated from you. Of course, Bhattacharya concludes, the last slokam is always, it's a very powerful way how he concludes a dashakam. Bhattacharya says, Iti nan anugrihya vallavihi vipinonteshu pureva sancharan karuna shishiro hare 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 hara tvaraya mama karuna shishire hare hara tvaraya me sakala maya valim. O Hari, thus did you remove the transgression of the Katyayini vow committed by the Gopikas on account of entering the river waters without clothes? By virtue of the repentance shown through shame? This is a question that Bhattacharya is asking Krishna. Oh, did you just take away the sin that they committed by simply offering them that something good is going to come to you? So that's it? Well, of course, Bhattacharya smiles and tells Krishna, you did also agree to fulfill their wishes. This is something very strange. You did bless them thus in two ways. Then you did commence moving about in the forest as before, grazing cows. You, whose heart melts with compassion always, please also remove as soon as possible my ailments. Don't forget them. Bhattacharya calls Bhagavan Hare here. It is a particular significance in the sloka. Harati means to take away, and Hriyate means is taken away, is carried off. Prahlada said in Haryashtakam, Harir Harati Papani Dutta Chittairapi Smrtaha Anichayapi Samsprutto Dahatyevahi Pavakaha. You may remember this, and many people, many of your households, you will be doing this quite often at home before you go to bed. Harir Harati Papani Dutta Chittairapi Smrtaha Anichayapi Samsprutto Dahatyevahi Pavakaha. It is Bhagavan who takes away or destroys all the miseries and sins of the devotees, just as in the case of Gopikas. It is also the same Bhagavan who has been carried away by the intense devotion of the Gopikas from Gokulam to the banks of Yamuna and Vrindavanam in the chilly winter mornings. These two inner meanings are embedded in the address of Hare. No one suspects that goddess Ganga, who destroys big sins of those who take bath unto her, is defiled or polluted by the sins that they may have committed before taking a bath in her. Similarly, when Bhagavan, by mere contact with his feet, confers purity on even such Ganga, it needs no mention. In fact, Ganga is one place where the rest of the mankind, they dump all their sins. And Ganga goes to the feet of Bhagavan so that she can be purified. Now we are talking about Bhagavan dealing with the sins of the gopis, which were not that great, but they were sins all right. But a very look by Bhagavan and the episode that he created here, giving them the assurance that he will satisfy their desires very soon, everything is taken care of. It needs no mention here that Pavitranam Pavitraha, the purest among the pure, cannot be defiled by any sin. Let's see more on this in the next session.
Narayana 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 Narayana. Hare Krishna, Thiruvaiyaru, Narayana.